Hi, my name is Erin Bertoli and I am a board-certified behavior analyst with Brett DNAV Associates. This video is a follow-up to one previously created on the analysis of private events and use of acceptance and commitment therapy with kids. If you aren't familiar or haven't already viewed it, please check out our channel for that and other content that has been created on acceptance and commitment therapy. In my previous discussion of private events, I mentioned two different ACT-based models that have been developed for kids, the AIM curriculum and the DNAV model. This video will review the DNAV model. The two people behind this approach are Dr. Louise Hayes and Dr. Joseph Ciarrochi. The two together have authored the book, The Thriving Adolescent, using acceptance and commitment therapy and positive psychology to help teens manage emotions, achieve goals, and build connections. And, along with Ann Bailey, the corresponding workbook, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life for Teens. They also have an entire chapter dedicated to their work in the book, Evolution and Contextual Behavioral Science, an integrated framework for understanding, predicting, and influencing human behavior by David Sloan Wilson and Stephen Hayes. All three pieces of literature are the basis of review for this video. We'll start with a brief discussion of why this model is needed. I will then do a brief overview of the model and discuss the theoretical and philosophical foundation behind it, and conclude with how it's done. Again, this is a very brief overview. If you are interested in learning more, I would encourage you to read the literature and visit their website for free videos, downloads, research publications, and training opportunities at www.thrivingadolescent.com. So why ACT for kids? And why the DNAV model? Because life can be hard. Because too many kids have experienced trauma. Because a single day can bring forth strong and opposing states, love and loneliness, freedom and constraint, excitement and fear, confidence and self-doubt. Because suffering is inevitable for all humans due to our capacity to worry about the future, ruminate about the past, and get stuck inside our judgments of ourselves and others. We need to respond to our setbacks with self-compassion and find ways to make peace within ourselves and our world. In contrast to AIM, the DNAV model is not a curriculum per se. It's a holistic way to help a child learn how to discover their talents, connect with their feelings, use their minds, learn how to be with themselves, and make friends and social connections. The DNAV model presents an approach that is grounded in contextual behavioral science, a scientific and pragmatic way of understanding behavior, finding solutions to human problems, and promoting human growth and development. It is based on a framework that incorporates scientific knowledge from evolutionary science principles, variation, selection, and retention for the purposes of adaptation, operant principles for contingent learning, relational frame theory for language and cognition, and acceptance and commitment therapy for applied mindfulness and behavior change. Let's break that down a little further. We'll start with the evolutionary theory, which can be summarized as follows. We try different behaviors in the world, variation. We are reinforced for doing some things and punished for doing others, selection. And we repeat behaviors that have worked for us in the past, retention. We do these behaviors for the purposes of adapting to our context and ultimately for surviving. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of this theory is that failure to thrive can also be thought of as failure in variation, selection, and/or retention. Next is the philosophy of functional contextualism, which simply explains how behavior functions in a particular context. The authors remind us that behavior can be overt, which is observable, and covert, which includes thoughts, feelings, sensations, and memories. It explains how all behavior is purposeful and is an adaptation to a specific context. The next foundation of the model is the principle of operant conditioning. According to Skinner, operant principles are analytic tools that are widely used to study the behavior of humans and animals. According to operant theory, behavior that is reinforced will get stronger and repeat more frequently, and behavior that is punished will weaken or are less likely to repeat. Operant conditioning is essential in shaping and modifying behavior. The final basis for the DNAV model is relational frame theory. RFT is a psychological account of human language and cognition. RFT shows how symbolic thought, such as judging and believing, is under the control of contextual factors, meaning it can be reinforced or punished. and is therefore subject to the same operant principles that have proven so useful in shaping nonverbal behavior. It explains how verbal behavior transforms our responses to emotions, our sense of self, and to stimuli in the physical world. The goal of RFT is to change the way we interact with our own verbal behavior. If we can't get rid of our negative thoughts, then we need to alter the frames and learn new ways to respond to them. The DNAV model has the same goal of ACT, which is to increase psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility can be defined as the ability to contact the present moment more fully as a conscious human being, and to change or persist in behavior when doing so serves valued ends. But the authors talk about how this definition and the 6 processes of ACT can be quite complex. They knew that ACT with kids needed to be approached differently than with adults, so they built a more developmentally appropriate model. Dr. Stephen Hayes, one of our biggest leaders in acceptance and commitment therapy, talks about the DNAV model as a clinical intervention that reflects the core of contextual behavioral science and of ACT and psychological flexibility processes, while giving much more direct guidance to therapists on how to do this work. I will say, as a behavior analyst who is used to things being very technological and objectively defined, using ACT with kids was very difficult for me to start. I had discovered ACT at an ABA conference years ago, bought some books, and started practicing on myself. As a stressed out working mom of 3, I was immediately hooked. And I knew that if I needed it, so did the parents of the kids with whom I worked. So I started utilizing ACT as part of a parent training model, but with kids. How do I use this stuff with kids? As I mentioned, I also love the AIM curriculum as a way to increase psychological flexibility with kids. But the DNAV model is not a curriculum, it's more of a way of life. So let's get into it. DNA describes 3 functional classes of behavior. The D stands for discoverer, the N is for noticer, and the A is for advisor. These terms are metaphors and are used pragmatically for skills that help guide us towards the V, values consistent action. We'll start with our noticer. As someone who has studied ACT longer than this model, to me the noticer is related to the ACT processes of present moment awareness and acceptance. The purpose of our noticer is to detect physical, psychological, and environmental events as they occur. How we respond to things in our environment with our 5 senses. We begin noticing as an infant. Young kids are noticers. They're mindful. Unfortunately, our culture shapes us to be mindless. To train noticer skills, the single most important question we can ask is, what did you notice? Or what was it like? There is never a right or wrong answer. The authors recommend 3 steps to noticing: normalize and allow. To normalize, we need to create awareness that all feelings are normal, teach that feelings do not need to be controlled, eradicated, changed, or managed, and teach that feelings pass, often in 90 seconds. It feels like it lasts much longer because we get feelings about our feelings, kind of like the snowball effect. AND stands for aware, name the body message, and describe. Research shows that people who are able to name what is happening in their body in the moment have better life performances, such as relationships, academics, and social and emotional intelligence. Allow you can compare to as acceptance in the ACT work. We need to make room for our feelings, sit with them, allow them. As Louise often states in her trainings, what do you notice? What do you feel? We can step into our noticer space anytime we need to. Stop talking, stop doing, and just notice. Label it, and then make a choice. Am I going to allow it or react? There are some fantastic experiential exercises in these books and on the website to teach noticing skills. Next is our advisor. It can be seen as our inner voice, our verbal behavior that is advising us along the way. The advisor is the metaphor for how we learn to use language and avoid trial and error mistakes and efficiently navigate the world. Our advisor activity includes judging events as good or bad, predicting, problem solving, and using rules. The purpose of this skill is to use past teaching and experience to navigate the present. The advisor begins with our parents early on. As we grow, our advisor is trained through our history of learning. Our advisor saves us from having to use trial and error learning. We can use our past experience to tell ourselves what we should do, as explained by relational frame theory. For example, if we are told when we are young, "Do not touch the stove, it is hot," then we can use that information to generalize and know that other things that look like a stove or that produce flames or glow red are also likely to be hot. We don't need to touch everything to find out if it is hot. Our advisor is our constant companion, ready to evaluate, judge, predict, and guide our actions. But our advisor can also be demanding and unhelpful if we become fused to our advisor's judgment or negativity. It can lead to rigid rule following, fixation on others' unhelpful ideas, and limit variation in behavior. The advisor has the power to make monsters appear, and again, as explained in RFT, we can develop these reactions without having any direct experience with them. Oftentimes, we are our own biggest critic and worst enemy. The ACT process of diffusion and flexible self as context can be helpful here. The authors also recommend some strategies to unhook when we're stuck, step out of our advisor space, and try using our discoverer and noticer skills. Next is our discoverer. Our discoverer's purpose is to expand our behavioral repertoire, to try new things and evaluate the outcomes, and find and create values and build strengths. The authors define discovery as an adaptive form of risk-taking, undertaken explicitly for the purposes of selecting new behaviors that are life-enhancing. It can play a role in helping us develop our values and explore some committed actions. The authors recommend 3 key steps to building our discoverer skills. 1, tracking the real-world results of behaviors rather than relying on the advisor. 2, identifying values. And 3, building strengths. To help people develop tracking skills, we can ask questions such as, how did this go? Did it help you connect to your values? Should you do more of it? And there are lots of exercises in the workbook to help build these skills. Again, our DNA guides us toward valued living. Values can be thought of as a compass that guides people through the storms and confusing times of life and towards the things that they care about. In Louise's trainings, I often hear her ask, what for? When we live in accordance with our values, we tend to live with more vitality. The authors define vitality as the capacity to live, grow, and develop, and is characterized by physical and intellectual vigor, energy, and the power to not just survive, but thrive. Values can be the basis for selection and retention of behavior. Having some clear values makes engaging in certain behaviors more or less reinforcing based on whether or not it is consistent with the value. The authors guide the development of values as follows. A value is chosen based on what we care about and what works for our life. A value is a quality of action, and like a compass, no matter how many times we fail to go west, each moment offers another opportunity to change directions and head west. A value is not an outcome or a goal, and it is not something that can be ever permanently achieved. A value is constructed from language and interactions with our world and arises from our discovery skills and as we explore and experience life. Values are dynamic, fluid, and can change in form and function, as well as relative importance. A value is intrinsically reinforcing and something that you do because it's important, meaningful, and/or enjoyable. Our DNA skills continually overlap and influence each other. As we turn to our discoverer, we still need to use our noticer and advisor skills, as discovery often brings up difficult emotions. The text and trainings offer many case conceptualizations and examples to show all of this in practice. One simple exercise that I love to teach kids as they're learning the DNA is the acronym for being bold. Breathe deeply and slow down. Observe your thoughts and feelings. Observe what is going on around you. Listen to your values in this moment. What sort of person do you want to be? Decide on how you want to act in this moment. What would it look like if you were acting out your values? As I've mentioned in other videos, there are a lot of behavior analysts in our field who believe that ACT and this type of intervention is talk therapy and outside of our scope of practice. Dr. Stephen Hayes provides some very compelling words in the foreword of the Thriving Adolescent book. Scaling psychological concepts from the individual to the group has been a hallmark of behavior analysis from the very beginning. Contextual Behavioral Science and ACT has used the linkage to evolutionary ideas and the evolution of culture to return to that original vision, and this book makes that process extremely clear. We are social beings, and leaving the group out of the psychological approach to children leaves children without their natural context. The DNA model stands atop of decades of hard work in thinking through psychological flexibility issues, functional contextualism, relational frame theory, and evolution science issues. But for where we are now as a field, it seems to represent a major step forward, not as a substitution for these other issues, but as part of the range of applied scientific and clinical tools we need to progress from where as a community we are today. And as any good behavior analyst would do, if we focus on behavior change, keep things objective, and collect some data, we are practicing within our scope. I'll even go as far as saying that we have an ethical responsibility to use ACT and models like these when using differential reinforcement and contingency plans have not proven effective. We need to include an analysis of private events into our work. This model, along with the AIM curriculum, has taken my approach with my clients to a whole new level. There are lots of ways to collect data to determine if the approach is having any effect. You can use precision teaching, or simply chart occurrences of defined committed actions or defined instances of experiential avoidance. You can have the individual self-monitor and log instances of flexible or inflexible behavior. Or most simply, if you are already collecting data on behaviors being targeted, simply continue to collect that data and add a phase line in after you started implementing these practices. Your dependent variable is the behaviors being tracked, and your independent variable is your intervention, just like usual. If you'd like to help us continue to disseminate the science, please click the subscribe button below.